Hi, Connie. I think you're on mute, Connie. And while you're figuring that out, are you good?
I am good. Hey, Jackie.
I'm going to welcome everybody and thank you for being here this evening. Tonight's theme is Doing Justice, Challenging Extremism Together, the Action Fund Celebration. And I'm Jackie Norris, and I'm happy to be here with you tonight. And Connie, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you so much. You cannot hear me again?
This is not a great way to start, but while we're waiting for Connie to figure out her technology, for all of you listeners, I'm actually going to warm you up with a little bit of trivia, right? This is how we roll. So here we go. We can hear Connie. I can't hear Connie. Well, this is kind of a problem. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
We're going to work out our technological difficulties. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk and we're going to work through this. So thank you to all of our sponsors that are here and present and listening. Hopefully you saw your names listed on the slides. We are so appreciative to all that you do and that you give and donate to support the work of the Iowa Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund. We couldn't do it without you. So if you haven't given and you would like to give, what I want to do is encourage you to look at the information that is below and consider how you can donate. Donate to this great cause, and along the way, we'll keep prompting you and reminding you the multiple ways that you can support the Action Fund tonight. So to kick it off, though, we think trivia is a great way to go. And so for those of you that have access to your chat, I want you to get your chat, your typing figures out. So here is a trivia question. It is very focused on the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund. Before COVID, where did Connie and lobbyist friends usually work from each day of the legislative session? So if you know the answer, just type it in there. And Kristen is going to be our fearless leader, and she's going to be checking the answers. So while that's happening, Connie, I'm going to turn it to you. Hopefully you can hear me. Mary Jane Cobb got the answer already, didn't she? All right. Congratulations. It is the cafeteria in the Capitol. So look at this. I had the pleasure of reading the Des Moines Register a few days ago, Connie, and it says, challenging extremism has never been more important. So, Connie, it's been a hard year. I'd love to thank you for your hard work, first of all, and ask you to tell us about your why. Tell us what is motivating you right now more than ever to be fighting on behalf of all of us Iowans.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. Hopefully you can hear me now. I know folks can't in the audience can, because a couple folks text me, but I'm glad you can hear me as well, Jackie. That actually helps our conversation a lot. There are a lot of things that motivate me. And, first and foremost, my kids, always, my family and friends, especially those who work in public education, who are working so hard this year under just really difficult conditions, progressive lawmakers and my lobbyist friends who sit at that table in the cafeteria, used to sit at that table in the cafeteria working hard work this year. But I also have this little elephant, and I know that's kind of weird. People know my politics outside of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. But I have this little elephant, and it is usually up in my window, and I keep it in eyesight for the when I work at home. And it was Lieutenant Governor Joy Corning's. And it was at her funeral, folks could choose one of her elephants. She had a huge collection of elephants. She got them all over the world, and we could choose which one we wanted. And so I chose this one, and I keep it up in my window. And it really reminds me every day of her, and also that there are good public servants doing the work day in and day out, and they're doing it for the right reasons. To do justice and to make the world better for other people. And so that is my why, folks like Joy Corning doing that work. So that's what keeps me motivated.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'm just going to ask all of you as we go through this conversation tonight, and for those of you that are listening, it can be kind of tough and rough hearing what's going on up at the Capitol, but I want you to focus on your why. Why do you support the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund? Why do you fight? Why do you care? That's really important as we go through this evening. So it is now my pleasure to welcome Jean Swenson. For those of you that don't know Jean, she is the board chair. And Jean, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We're glad that you're here. So you've been part of this organization for quite some time. You've been an advocate. You've been on the board. Tell us why the Action Fund is so important and how the Action Fund uses collective voices to impact issues.
You know, I've been a political junkie from the time I went to Girls State when I was a junior in high school in 1971. And you know, what goes on at the Capitol, because I was a public school teacher, it affected pretty much everything in my life. And I chose this organization because I so appreciate the fact that Connie is the queen of civil discourse. And I know, and if anybody ever wants to hear my story of one of my first lobbying experiences, it did not go well. And so I really appreciate the fact that Connie is there to do the work and do it in a civil manner where it really does make a difference. And I love all of the issues that she's lobbying, that Interfaith Alliance has approved and asked her to bring forward. You know, the underdog, I was a public school teacher, I love underdogs. The underdog is just forgotten, except for organizations like this and the people who really care about social justice.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, you know, I guess my follow-up question, and this is an imagine if, but, you know, what if there was no Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund? What if there was no lobbying and advocacy? What would our state look like? Just, you know, use your thoughts on that. Share your thoughts.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is it would be a mess because there would be all these different organizations and there would be no spokesperson. And, you know, the fact that Connie, if the media needs a statement about what's going on in justice matters, they'll go to Connie. I don't know who they'd go to otherwise. Yeah. And I like to have her as our spokesperson.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Jean, and thank you for your leadership. I believe now we're going to welcome a new participant, Miss Mary Jane Cobb. Can we see your face? There she is. It's like magic. Welcome. Mary Jane is a board member as well, and she is also the executive director of the Iowa State Education Association. So Mary Jane, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah, so there is a lot happening in the legislature impacting Iowa's public schools. It's a really long list. Can you share two things that you see are the most important challenges facing or happening right now in the legislature that are being discussed?
I think I'll do one that's really global, and that is the attack on educators' ability and right to teach what they know is appropriate and necessary in their classrooms. People who don't understand the curriculum, don't understand age-appropriate materials, trying to decide what's being taught in our classrooms. And then the other thing, obviously, is the governor's plan to take money out of our public education system, divert it to private schools in the forms of vouchers. They're going to call them education savings accounts and lots of other interesting things. They're vouchers. So the attacks on our educators and the attacks on our funding mechanisms, I think, pretty much covers it. And the attack on our students. That part, I was going to say, that part just hurts my soul. It's one thing to attack the adults in the system, but to attack the students that are different than you, that you may not understand their background, you may not understand who they are. As a legislator, your job is to lift them up and hold them and support them, not attack them.
I really appreciate that comment. And Jean, it's probably a natural segue to you. You were a public teacher for a long time. Talk a little bit about how politics has changed the public schools in the past several years, the changes that you've seen take place.
I taught school for 33 years, and I worked with legislators. I was represented by people of both parties, and I always had a relationship with them while I taught. That isn't happening right now. Even when I emailed my very own legislator at the time, if we were on different sides of the issue, he would never get back to me. Whereas back in the day of stamps and telephones, my guy would call me up and ask my opinion because he looked at me as being the expert. That isn't happening right now. We never had any money. I never made any money. I never had money for stuff in my classroom, but I loved the job. Teachers love their job. They're called to this job. If you're not called to the job, you're out within just a couple, 3 years because it's hard work. But what's happening now where the teachers are not looked upon as experts in their fields, I can't imagine what that would be like. In fact, I have some idea because my daughter is a teacher, and it's hard to watch.
It is.
So yeah, we need to change that because who really is in the crosshairs of it all are the kids.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you both putting a human face on it because I think so often when things are taking place up at the Capitol, they don't think of the collateral damage, which is the teachers, the students, and quite honestly, the community and the economic vitality of the state long term. But Connie, I know you have a question you'd like to ask.
Yeah, and I just want to echo everything that you said and Jean said. And I have a son and a daughter-in-law who are educators as well. And all of them are, and I have a brother who's an administrator, and they're all just feeling it right now. Mary Jane, one of the things I think that is the superpower of the Action Fund and Interfaith Alliance in general, and one of the things we do best is to empower our folks to use their voices on a broad spectrum of issues. And if you're talking directly to people who are watching this, how do you want folks to use their voices at the State House in their communities to support public schools and public school teachers?
So a couple of things. First, I want to say that, yes, that is your superpower. That is Interfaith Alliance's superpower. And because of that, Interfaith Alliance is actually ISEA's Friend of Education this year, because we know the level of commitment that Interfaith Alliance has to our public schools and our students. But a couple of things I want you to do, folks. If you have just a couple of minutes, reach out to your legislator and tell them you support your public schools, that you support your public educators, the administrators, and you want those people to be able to do their work. And if you have a couple more minutes, reach out to those public educators. Every one of you knows somebody that's in a school as a teacher, a librarian, a bus driver, a cafeteria worker. Reach out to them, tell them you see them, you appreciate what they're doing for the students, and we need them to stay in their jobs. We're hearing that over 50% of the educators nationwide are thinking about leaving. That is not something that's okay for our students and for our state. So tell your legislators you support public education and to support our schools, and then tell your local public educators what they mean to you.
I really appreciate that, giving that advice. Mary Jane, I'm going to ask a follow-up question of you, which is, some people will talk about the value of public education. Some will want to hear it in different terms. Maybe it is around our economy. It is around the health and vitality of communities. Can you give us another suggested talking point or a way to engage some legislators that may look at this issue just a little bit different?
Sure. Well, when you're looking at recruiting businesses into Iowa, I know that Future Ready Iowa and workforce development and attracting employers into our state is incredibly important for everyone. One of the first things those companies look at is what is the quality of the public education in the community that they're coming to. It is an economic development engine. For every dollar that's spent on public education in our local school communities, that money turns around anywhere between $12 and $17 a piece. Because of the amount of money that our public educators spend in their communities, they buy houses, they buy cars, they pay utilities, they buy groceries. So it is not only an altruistic, important thing for us to support, but it is part of what drives the economic engine of our state.
That was great. I really appreciate it. And I think, what's really important for everybody to remember is when you think about Jean and you think about the role that she played as a teacher of 33 years, or what Mary Jane's doing every day up at the Capitol, keep telling stories that is really, continuing to put a human face on who the teachers are, who the students are, and the impacts to our community. So thank you. Thank you, ladies, both for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Connie, I'm going to pivot to you because it is first funnel has gone by, and we're going to talk a little bit about the legislative session. Before we do that, we are going to have a trivia question. So here's a question for people in the chat. Who was the first official registered lobbyist that represented the voice of the Action Fund at the State House? That's the question. And so, Kristen, we'll be looking to you to see what answers come up, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we'll let that go. We'll let that percolate for a couple of minutes. So, Connie, we just talked about First Funnel happened on Friday. We've been hearing a little bit about what's happening up at the Hill. What are your legislative priorities?
Yeah, so we always work on public education issues. So all of the issues that Mary Jane and Jean just talked about. Of course, today the House is debating the trans athlete bill, and I was just watching that before we were on, and it just breaks my heart. And then there's, of course, also vouchers and so many other bills, banning books, all of those pieces that are just weighing heavily on our hearts. All the LGBTQ issues, as I said, the anti-transgender athlete bill, religious exemptions, all of those pieces continue to play out at the State House. Protecting reproductive health care is always a priority of ours, always. And there are just a whole host of issues, but I would really say those three areas are the main areas, but we do a whole lot of other issues as well.
Yeah, you're really doing a lot. And so, and also what I would want people to know is we have our legislators, and they were planning on being with us, and they are working as we speak. And so we hope the whole program would be live tonight, but legislative time often gets in the way. So what we have in store for you is a conversation that Connie and I had the chance to do with Senator Zach Walz, who's our minority leader of the Senate, and then Representative Jennifer Confirst, who is the minority leader of the House. And so earlier today, this was filmed, and so take a look. Welcome, Senator Walz and Representative Confirst. We're so happy to have you both here on a really important and busy day for both of you. So First Funnel was last week, and I'd love to hear from both of you. Same question. What is one outcome that you are excited about and proud about and happy about that you want to tell us? And what are two pieces of legislation still heading down the pike that are challenging and worrisome that you want to make us aware? And so, Senator Walz, I'll turn it to you first.
Well, thank you very much, Jackie. It's great to be with you, and Connie, always nice to see you. Representative Confirst and I have been hard at work here at the State House over the last several weeks as the legislative session has gotten started. And unfortunately, I'd say it's probably more bad news than good news at this point. We've got a couple of bills that made it through the funnel last week that we've got really serious concerns about. One of them here in the Senate is the proposal by Senator Jake Chapman that would charge teachers or librarians with an aggravated misdemeanor, which is punishable with up to 2 years of jail time, if they have books that they're trying to ban and get out of our schools. We've certainly heard from a lot of parents on both sides of this issue, but fundamentally, we don't think that the right solution to concerns about books is to jail teachers and librarians. We've always said that parents, of course, have the right and should be involved with their children's education. But we don't think that threatening teachers with jail time is going to help solve, frankly, the shortage of teachers that we're seeing across the entire state of Iowa, and in fact is going to make that problem a heck of a lot worse. There has been a bipartisan parental bill of rights that is not perfect, and there are some concerns that we're trying to address with an amendment on the floor, but that has been brought forward on a bipartisan basis in the Senate that we have hopes for potentially seeing on the floor in the near future. I should stress that is a little different from a bill in the House that I know Representative Converse can speak to about so-called transparency. That is kind of a non-starter for a lot of us. So we have some really serious concerns about it. But education has been a really big topic here in the legislature so far. One thing that I'm very proud of is the work between this House and Senate caucus together, working on a joint education proposal that would have funded our schools with $300 million of new money. That would have been a 5% increase in the state's supplemental aid. Contrast that with the Republicans who proposed a $300 million corporate tax giveaway. We think if we've got the money, we should be spending it on our kids, not big corporations.
I really appreciate that perspective, and always trying to highlight also the things that as progressives we need to continue to advocate for. Representative Converse, same question for you. Something you're excited about, and a couple of things that are pretty worrisome to you.
Well, I agree with Senator Walz about our concerns regarding, the direction of session so far. 6 weeks in, we're not off to a great start. Democrats have proposed a lot of things, including, a fair tax proposal that would have helped the middle class first and most, and would have stopped people who make $1 million a year or more from getting tax cuts. We think they've gotten their tax cuts. It's time for the middle class to win this time. Disappointed, of course, that failed. I'm actually, how they say you can't prove a negative. I'm happy that something died. I'm happy that in the House, the cameras in the classroom bill died. Although I would have had some fun with amendments on that. I am happy that that bill is not going forward. I'm happy to see that bipartisan effort to do radon testing in schools is going forward. That's a really important measure that's actually not as cumbersome on school districts as I thought in terms of cost, and will be so beneficial to districts. So there are things that we're happy are going forward as well. But look, we hear a lot from our friends across the aisle that, a lot of bills that pass up at the Capitol are bipartisan. Well, sure, but the big ones aren't. And I think that's what we all need to pay attention to, is that a lot of the things that happen up there do happen on party lines. Very concerned, as Senator Walz said, about education issues, funding issues like that. Concerned about some of these so-called transparency measures that are really just onerous, on teachers, onerous regulations on teachers that won't give parents any information that's not already out there. And so it makes, what it will do is force more standardization among educators for kids, not allow them to do as much, customization with students, and will really just not give people what they want. Unintended consequences seems to be the theme of the first 6 weeks of session, if only they were truly unintended. There are times that I think that's exactly what they want, and there are times that I give them the benefit of the doubt. But those times about the benefit of the doubt are getting fewer and fewer as we head into week 7.
Thank you to both of you. Senator Walz, there has been so much extreme legislation at the State House this year that will impact Iowans negatively. What is the best way that everyday Iowans can engage in the conversation on the Hill or at home on the issues that you've just talked about or that really matter to them?
Well, the most important thing that you can do is speak directly to your own legislator, whether they're in the House or in the Senate. Even if you have someone who is supportive of an inclusive and safe Iowa like we are, it's always nice to hear from folks who have our back. We deal with a lot of negativity up here at the State House, and so having the folks who are supportive be able to reach out is always appreciated. And those who are trying to advance that radical and really extreme agenda that pits Iowans against Iowans and tries to use some marginalized group as a wedge to divide us rather than to unite us, they need to hear from their constituents who have these concerns too. We hear often from Republicans who say, well, I'm not hearing anyone who supports inclusion or what have you, but we know that those voices are out there, and it's critically important that you contact your representative or your senator and you make sure that they know they are not fighting for the shared Iowa values of bringing people together and this belief that we all do better when we all do better. So just being in touch with your legislators, whether it's by email, a phone call, a visit at the State House, or even a letter, they all make a big difference.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think for everybody listening too, it's important to remember how much our legislators need us right now, especially those that are up there advocating and fighting for us and the issues that we care about. So thank you. So Representative Converse, you talked about the radon as an example, legislation, something you were excited about. What gives you hope? You have several more weeks to go. And so what's good and possible at the State House this year? Something you'd like to highlight?
I think that it is possible to, again, I'm going back to my prove a negative. Clearly, it's a Monday of week 7 after funnel week because I'm only seeming to prove negatives. But I think we can still stop vouchers. I keep hearing that there are some people in the Republican House caucus who aren't supportive of closing rural schools, which is what this would do. And so we're hopeful there that we can stop that. I think that we can do some things on a daily basis that really help Iowans, things like expanding health insurance coverage for hearing aids and making sure that we, allow first responders to have greater access to naloxone, for example. I mean, things that really make a difference on the ground, I think we can still make some progress with. My problem lies continually with the big picture things that get all the attention because they're so devastating. Some of them are symbolic and that symbolism is devastating. Some of them have real teeth, and that is also devastating. So I see some really good hope with not little things. They're big things to the people that they affect that don't get the coverage. But there are a lot of things up there that I'm just incredibly concerned about. Election year session since 2017, particularly, or the 2017-2018 cycle or session seems to be particularly nasty. And we're seeing that repeated again this year.
Great, thanks. So in closing, Senator Walz, quick question for you. Why do organizations like the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa matter to you on days like today?
Well, I think organizations like Interfaith are critically important because they help bring Iowans together to not just have community, but to make change and to do so in a way that is effective, that supports our friends, that creates accountability, and that helps create a positive vision for where we want Iowa to go. One of my favorite pieces of scripture is in Proverbs, when there's no vision, the people perish. And I think organizations like Interfaith, for having that vision and helping give the people a hope and a sense of where we want to go as a state, I think it's critically important. And I'm so glad to be supporting you and so grateful for the work that you do for the state of Iowa.
Thank you. We appreciate you both so much. Go get them today.
Thank you very
Senator.
much.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Representative.
Thank you.
Well, we are so lucky. We are so lucky to have such strong, vocal legislators up there advocating for us each and every day. And I want to do a couple of things. First of all, a shout out to Susie Alexander. Susie Alexander identified Judy Hoffman as one of the early lobbyists for the Interfaith Alliance. And sadly, some of you who knew Judy know that she passed away way too early. But congrats, Susie, on highlighting that. Judy did some great work for the Alliance.
Yeah, and if I can just say, Jackie, so Judy was our first hired official lobbyist. There was lots of lobbying happening, obviously, before by individuals and kind of the whole crew. But Judy was the first person that we hired to be a lobbyist, and she was phenomenal. And she really taught me the ropes and was an amazing person.
Yeah, really appreciate that. So everybody watch your wallets. Here comes Lori. So I want to introduce to you Lori Lane, who is the Director of Development. And she joined in the beginning of 2022. And so Lori, welcome. And my question to you is, what stands out in the work? You just started this. So what are some of your observations since joining the Interfaith Alliance?
Thank you, Jackie. And that comment that you made, watch your wallets, sounds exactly like something my father has said many times. As far as what I see in Interfaith is, we only know what we know in this world. And to understand bias, or you have to understand the inequity. Now, as a woman, I know the full catalog of how that exists and how that is written into the way our government has done business for far too long. but I'm a cisgendered white woman. And so as much as I care about some of these other issues of equality, I am not aware of the full spectrum of biases that exist. And so Interfaith goes in there, makes sure that the people who do understand are involved in helping to advocate for legislation that is bias free. And to me, I just can't think of what would be more valuable for us to have hope for a better future.
And Lori, what are the funds that are being raised tonight? What does that help fund with the Action Fund?
It really pays for Connie's time at the Capitol. She's there nonstop from the time it starts to the time it ends every day, monitoring all the issues that Interfaith focuses on. We have some very credible, even world-class journalists in our state, but their page and airspace is limited. And the Action Fund, which is Connie's time at the Capitol, allows us to monitor everything start to finish and really address the places where things are either going in the right direction or moving in the wrong direction, and then really activate all the rest of us to make sure that we are doing our part as citizens to advocate for what's important to us.
Great. So in 15 seconds or less, top 3 ways that people can donate.
Well, I believe you have a button on your screen. That's the information that Kristen gave me. And if that's not the case, all you have to go do is go to the website, interfaithallianceiowa.org. And if you're on your phone and the icon doesn't come up immediately, you'll see 3 little bars in the upper right-hand corner, and you push those, and then it will give you a donate option. Or if you are just going on your computer, it should come right up.
Great. Plenty of ways to give tonight, and we really encourage you to do so. So, Lori, thanks for all of your hard work.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to welcome back Connie. Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Lori.
Connie, we're going to call you a PK.
You're going to have to tell some people what that is.
Well, why don't you?
It is a preacher's kid, and I'm actually a preacher's kid times 2.
So explain that. Just tell us just a little bit about the background that you bring to this conversation tonight.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, when I was 7, my dad went to seminary and became an ordained minister. And so I grew up being a preacher's kid. And then when I went to college, my mom went to seminary. And so then I became a double PK.
I love that. A double PK.
Yes.
She's not a PK. She's a double PK.
I'm a double PK.
The intersection of faith and politics on a daily basis has got to be fascinating. I kind of would have loved to sit around your dinner table. But talk about how the grounding of being somebody that comes from such a deep faith background, your daily advocacy work, how do those 2 things intersect on a daily basis for you?
Yeah, my faith is so central to who I am and living it out in my life. And it really compels me to care for others. And if you know scripture, Micah 6:8 is the verse I go to on a daily basis, doing justice. But food on the table for every child, an adult, a solid roof over people's heads, speaking out for the rights of other people, fighting against hate and bigotry and all of its ugly forms, really doing justice, which for me means also challenging extremism, the theme for tonight. And politics is really about public policy. And it is an essential way, a critical way to have an impact and ensure our state and our communities are more just for every person. And so my faith and how I do my work is very much intertwined.
I really appreciate that comment. And I know you're going to queue up the next conversation. I want to say that when I first learned of the Interfaith Alliance, the thing that I remember so vividly is civility and thoughtfulness and kindness and a willingness to listen to both sides and look at things through a few different lenses. And so it is a missing voice, I think, when the Interfaith Alliance is not there leading the charge. So we're so grateful to you. So why don't you cue up the next conversation?
Well, as you said earlier, the legislative time got in the way of us doing this entire program live, but we are really grateful to the legislators who took the time to do some pre-recording for us for tonight in place of that. And so we're excited to have Representative Lindsey James, who is the minority whip in the House, and also Senator Sarah Trone Garriott. And they spoke with Jackie and me yesterday and how they approach faith and politics. Welcome, Senator Trone Garriott and Representative James. Thanks so much for being with us.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Connie.
Terrific. Jackie?
Well, we're both so blessed to have you in the legislature each and every day fighting the really good fight. And I guess what I'd love to hear, you've been there for 4 years, first from you, Representative James, and then from you, Representative Trone Garriott. What has surprised you the most about your experience in the legislature?
Sure, that's a great question. There's some hopeful surprises, and then some ones that were a little bit more difficult to stomach. I'll start with the hopeful surprise for me was just seeing the resiliency of our state and our community when major, egregious bills would come to the legislature. The willingness of the public to stand up, to speak out, and to push back was deeply profound. Being able to sit, my first year sat in the front row of the legislature on the floor, and you're front row to some pretty difficult things. And despite being front row, there would be family and friends in the gallery, constituents, Iowans in the gallery cheering us on, and that was deeply meaningful. I think I can't fail to mention, though, Jackie, the surprise for me. On the negative side is the outsized voice and influence of corporate lobby. So I think, for me, knocking on so many doors and hearing from constituents and learning what really mattered to them, and then showing up to the Capitol and meeting, the lobbyists from the big pharmaceutical company or this big corporation or the insurance industry. And I kept looking around thinking, well, who's out there being the voice for the poor, the pushed aside, the people who are on the margins of society, and realizing that, if it's not the corporate, it's not the lobby, it's us. Yeah. So, really owning that. But it was a hard surprise for me.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment because I think it holds up why Interfaith Alliance of Iowa is so important. And also for all of the people that are watching this, just the little emails, the little messages, showing up at the Capitol and cheering you on because you are our fighters on the Capitol as well. And so Representative Trone Garriott, what about you?
So I'm going to share a more negative one. I'm surprised by how little homework actually goes into some major policy decisions that get passed each year. So in the process, we have at most a 1-hour subcommittee where the public can offer their comments. And that's kind of it. Because sometimes bills move so fast through the process that there's very little time between the steps for the word to get out, for the public to even know who to contact and to get their voice heard. And so we saw that with last year's restrictions to voting rights that moved through the process in the Senate from subcommittee to debate in 1 week. We're seeing it this year with the tax policy changes that are coming through the process without real hard numbers to help us understand the impact that these policy changes are going to make on our financial future as a state and who it's going to benefit and who it won't help. And so sometimes we see a super national agenda being pushed by out-of-state forces. Sometimes these pieces of legislation come to us from legislators with a hyper local focus. I mean, so much so that it's one person that this is an issue for, and it might be the legislator themselves, and they're changing all of Iowa code based on the words of folks from outside or one very, very narrowly focused situation. And we really need to take the time and do the work to make sure we understand how these policies impact our entire state and how that's going to impact us in the long term. So it is disappointing sometimes to see these pieces of legislation moving through without the work being done to make sure we fully understand how they're going to impact our state.
Thank you.
Thank you for both of those answers, and your deep understanding of all of the issues is so important. And you know, there's a lot of really tough issues that we face at the State House day in and day out. And one particular side sometimes feels like it has the moral high ground on those issues, certainly in abortion as an example, but lots of other issues. And so how do you approach those conversations with lobbyists or with constituents? And just how do you approach those conversations when it's coming from a very moral perspective? And we'll go with Senator Trungaried on that one first. Sorry.
Thank you, Connie. So one faith viewpoint may get all the media attention on a particular issue, and certain issues get framed as faith issues. But I think people who are active in faith communities know there are many faith issues, and the use of money and the flip side of how we treat the poor, what our responsibility to the poor is one of the most significant faith issues for the top 6 world religions. So I like to remind folks at the Capitol of that. And so we've got some tremendous opportunities to work together because there are so many faith issues that we can address from a variety of religious perspectives, despite the issues that divide. And it's an opportunity to test out how strong the faith commitment truly is rather than the partisan commitment. So to be reminding folks, hey, you know, I understand this is your tradition. This is something that's central to the teaching of that tradition. Let's talk about how we can work together on those issues, even if we disagree about how we're going to approach another issue. But for me, it's always what works. You know, if you have a certain goal in mind, is this policy actually helping us achieve it or not? So it's also another way to test, is this truly accomplishing what you say you want?
Thanks so much. Representative James, I'm going to ask you a different question. The theme of tonight's event is doing justice, challenging extremism together. And that is certainly a sacred text, but it also is used in a secular fashion as well. But what does that mean to you and that intersection of religion and politics and the work that you do at the State House? How do you do justice at the State House?
Some days are more difficult than others. I'll start with that. I try to walk the steps of the Capitol intentionally every single morning and day when I enter into the building. I think my first 2 years, I felt a pretty significant heavy weight about watching the extremism move through the chambers, and it took me a while to realize that it is not my responsibility to fix and solve everything that something sacred is moving in that place, and my responsibility is to pay attention to that and then try to partner alongside. And so now when I walk the steps of the Capitol, it really feels like I'm there to pay attention and to watch and then figure out what God is doing in that space and then attempt to move, against some of the push. And I think for a while, there were scriptures about peacemakers and, middle and consensus and, parts of my own faith commitments that I had to wrestle with. What does that look like in the context of the legislature? And it became very clear that sometimes those scriptures are misunderstood, in terms of, maybe peace isn't necessarily found in the middle. Maybe it's not found in the compromise. Maybe it is actually, pointing out that one side is wrong or is on the wrong side of an issue. And so once I finally came to the place where I could pay attention to what God was doing in that space and then, kind of work through my own call in that sense, I felt like I was much more free to just push back, to speak up and to really fight. And, I do believe that, there is there is beauty in middle and beauty in compromise, and that God is there and present. But that at the same time, there are moments where it is our responsibility as people of faith to speak out and against a side that is wrong.
Really appreciate that perspective. That's really helpful. So Senator, sorry about that. I was calling you representative and you didn't even correct me. Trongariot, my question for you is about your why. So what is the, Representative James talked about walking up the stairs, on her way into the Capitol. As you think about what motivates you, is there a poem, a token, a song? What's the why that motivates you each and every day as you head to work?
For me, it's really the people. I hear all the time from people that I encounter in the community how much it matters to them, that there's someone who cares about them and is speaking on behalf of issues that are really important to them. And I tend to hear that more when I'm not in the Capitol building, when I'm away from the Capitol, when I'm out in the community. And so that's why it's really important for me in my life to just try to be present in my community a lot. I regularly preach and preside. I visit religious communities. I teach. I try to spend time with a lot of different folks in my community and show up from them. And that helps renew my energy for doing this work and reminds me why I'm doing this work is because of the needs I see in the community and the importance of making sure that their voices are heard in that building.
Great, thanks. And with the last few seconds, Representative James, why support Interfaith Alliance of Iowa? Why is it so important to our state?
I think we have a really profound opportunity as people with deep faith commitments to come together on particular issues. And we see that when voices are united, that really has a profound influence. And it's an invitation to be a part of shaping the conversation, the culture, and the future of our state in a significant way. But it takes all of us. And that's what's so beautiful about this organization.
Great. Thanks, ladies. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, that was such a great conversation and really positive in the midst of talking about some really difficult issues. But I appreciate how they talked about their intersection between faith and politics. So for those of you that are watching and you haven't had a chance to donate yet, there are so many different ways to do it. But please consider making a donation now. And you can use your voice and your wallet, support the Action Fund by going to the Interfaith Alliance Iowa.org. So, and the website is below me in the banner. Really appreciate that. I'm going to throw out another trivia question. And while I do that, I also want to make sure, before I do that, I want to make sure to thank all of our sponsors. This event is not possible without people that step up and sponsor the event at every level. And hopefully you saw your name in lights when we started, and we'll make sure to share those out at the end as well. But here is a quick trivia question. So get your fingers ready for those of you that like to participate. What is the table of progressive lobbyists, including Connie, affectionately known as? So you can put your comments in chat and we'll come back to those. But what I'd like to do now is, Connie, I want to talk to you about the power of collaboration. Interfaith Alliance, you don't do anything often by yourself. You do it with partners. So why is that important to you?
It is so critically important. And I said earlier when Mary Jane and Jean were on that our one of our superpowers, and our other superpower is really about collaborating and bringing folks together, bringing folks to the table. When we partner with other organizations that come at an issue, maybe from a different angle, a different perspective, we learn from each other, and we're also more effective with each other. And in that, we build relationships as part of that process. And we cannot and should not ever do social justice work in a silo. I just firmly believe that you have to do that with partners. And the other piece of that is the issues are so big that you can't do the work by yourself. You need other people to be part of it with you. And so we have always and will always work in collaboration with other organizations.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I got a little sidetracked because we have somebody who won the trivia question, and it was Erin Davison Rippey. Is it called the do-gooder table? Connie?
That's one of the names.
And the other one is?
The socialist table.
Okay, there you go. All right. Well, we've got a couple of great examples of people that you collaborate with. We've got Matt Sinovic from Progress, Iowa, and Reverend Rob Johnson from No Justice, No Peace. Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. Great to see you both.
Yeah, thank you.
So you turn on the news, you listen to what's happening in the State House, you look around and you see extremism, inequity. It's happening everywhere. So what motivates you to pump yourself up every day and go fight the fight? And Matt, I'll ask you first, and then Reverend Johnson, you second.
Okay. I mean, I think, well, first of all, I just thanks for having me here and having us here to talk about this, because we do so much work with Interfaith Alliance and partner on just about on so many different issues. But I think there's two things that stand out to me. One is that, I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean, there are people who are hurting across the state that need advocates, like Reverend Johnson, like our organization, the Interfaith Alliance. I mean, so many different people that are fighting for what's right up at the Capitol. And we have to keep those people in our hearts, and that's why we do this work. And the other thing that keeps us going, I mean, you just talked about the do-gooders table. I mean, I don't lobby, but especially before the pandemic, was up at the Capitol a lot, and you see these people who you're in this fight with day after day, and I think some of that collaboration and those partnerships go a long way in helping keep each other going. So I really do value that, and so I think those are the first two things that come to mind for me.
I really appreciate that. Now, Reverend Johnson, I am not going to put words in your mouth, but I do have to show one thing. So can everybody see that? Now, anybody who knows Rob Johnson, this guy is on the phone at the Capitol with the diaper bag with Eli in his arm, probably late for something. But so I'm sure Eli motivates you. But seriously, I mean, look, you see it every day. You see it in the people you serve. How do you stay positive and focused up at the Capitol?
So first of all, thank you, Connie, and thank you, Jackie and Interfaith, for having us today. And shout out to you, Matt, for the work that you guys are doing over there at Progress, Iowa. Jackie, you are absolutely right. If this was 3 months ago, I would have told you that just simply my mother is what motivates me. Seeing, when she died in 2014, a part of me felt so motivated to really push some of the ideas and what she was doing, because she was a people person. She was about touching people and making sure that we weren't trying to impress you, but we were trying to impact you. We were trying to be impactful, and not just with our words, but with policies, right? And then 3 months ago in November 7th to be exact, the motivation for me kicked into high gear when Elias Johnson was born. When that baby boy came out and I took one look at his face, I knew then that the work that Connie, that you, that Matt, that I was doing was not just feeble work, was not just us running our mouths, was not just us looking for something to complain about, was not just us making things up, but it was trying to create a world where Eli, where your children, Jackie, where Matt, where Connie's people, we can allow them to grow up in a space that we can say that we attributed to make better. We're in the middle of Black History Month, and I always tell people we read facts about Black history, but what we also need to do is make sure we're recognizing those who are making Black history right now. Because the question becomes, what will they say about you in 2032? What will they say about you in 2062? And I want to say this really quick. There was a white abolitionist who was a Quaker who helped start the Underground Railroad. And so people like Jackie and people like Connie and people like Matt, yea, though your skin tone may not be African American, but yet you're being impactful in making Black history because of the policies that you are pushing that will impact Black babies that look like Eli. So yes,
I
I'm
really
motivated.
appreciate that. Thank you. And I think that was really, really thoughtful and so well said. And I guess my question for you, Matt, is what should we be saying at the Capitol? You know, like kind of give us one or two, you know, kind of progressive talking points to break through some of the noise. What do you think is really resonating? I think, you know, Rob talked about like we're all human beings and babies, and we've heard about students and teachers, and but give us a couple of words of wisdom on how to move forward a progressive agenda through effective communication.
Sure. I thought you were going to ask me how am I supposed to follow Rob. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, yeah,
Well,
I mean, which is always a tough thing to
Yeah.
do. So, I think so. Our organization does do a lot of message research, and whether it's polling or just tracking what folks are saying, and we follow a pretty standard formula here, where we talk about first connecting with a shared value. I mean, a lot of times it's so easy to jump right to, especially with the current governor and legislature, it's so easy to jump right to what we think the problem is, what we think the solution needs to be. But when you start by trying to find that common ground and connecting on a shared value, you set the terms on a place where you can make that connection with someone else. So you start with a shared value, then you define either the problem or potentially the opposition, depending on the issue. And then we end with a call to action. So we want to leave people with something that they can do to make a difference. And by using that just simple 3-step formula, we've seen a lot of success in the messages that we've been able to develop and when we've worked with partners. So that's how I would suggest, how we would suggest moving forward on just about any issue.
I really appreciate that's a great way for people to think about how they can help and communicate right away. So in the remaining 30 seconds, Reverend Johnson, what gives you hope? What gives
We do. Simply put, we're fighting the good fight. And so I just want to encourage people to not give up, even though it seems tumultuous at times. It seems tough at times. But still remember, the Bible is very clear that joy will come in the morning, and weeping may endure for a night. And we've had a lot of nights, but believe that joy is coming.
Well, yes, exactly. Should we mic drop now? But seriously, gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being such great partners with the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. We really appreciate both of you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Connie, so here we go. Do we have time for one quick trivia question? Okay, so here we go. In the comments, list any groups that have partnered with the Action Fund. So just go. You can just start chatting away in there, and Kristen's going to massage those. So we want to thank all of our guest speakers tonight and all of you that work to make Iowa a better place to live. We want to thank our sponsoring hosts and donors, and those names are going to be up again after. You'll see those names, and without your funding, there would be no Action Fund. It's that clear. So your dollars really matter. And don't forget, you can still give. So remember, there's a website you can donate, and we take any donation you wish to give at interfaithallianceiowa.org. Connie, I'm going to turn it to you. What did you think?
This was such a I knew asking you again to do this would be the right choice and fabulous. And I do want to tell people, please keep giving, but we actually have, our goal was $35,000 for the whole campaign. So it started 5 weeks ago with our sponsors, and we have actually exceeded that. And we are now over 39,000. Yay. Thank you so much, everyone. But you can still keep giving.
Great. Any other special thank yous you want to say tonight before we wrap
Yeah,
up?
I just want to thank you, Jackie. I want to thank you for co-hosting and for being part of this and all of your support. I want to thank, again, our sponsors and donors and all of tonight's guests. Kristen Clark behind the scenes. Lori Lane is a wonderful new partner in this work. And our Action Fund board, of course, they are amazing people and always so supportive. All the partner organizations that we do our work with, because we could not do this work without them, as I have said. And I just simply want to thank all of you for being on tonight and joining us and all that you do, all of our advocates, all of our supporters, all you do to make Iowa a better place for all Iowans to call home. So thank you so much.
Go use your voice at the Capitol.
Absolutely.
Okay, go get them.
Thank
Thanks,
you so much,
everybody.
everyone. Have a great night.